snow bit into her bare feet. She collapsed, ribs aching from hunger. Her pack abandoned her. Death seemed certain until massive boots crunched nearby. A towering alpha knelt, his golden eyes locked onto hers. He didn't sneer. Instead, he stripped his heavy coat, wrapping her shivering, broken body inside. Elara Jenkins did not cry when Alpha Holden read her sentence. Tears, she had learned long ago, were a luxury Omegas could not afford in the Ironwood Pack. Standing in the center of the icy courtyard, Elara shivered in a threadbare cotton dress that offered zero protection against the brutal December winds. She was 19, though her hollow cheekbones and frail frame made her look much younger. Orphaned at 7 after her parents died in a meaningless border skirmish, she had been relegated to the bottom of the pack hierarchy. For 12 years, she scrubbed their floors, cooked their meals, and took their beatings. Now, she was being thrown away. "Elara Jenkins!" Holden's voice boomed, echoing off the frost-covered timber walls of the compound. He was a massive man, cruel and calculating, draped in heavy wolf furs. "You have been found guilty of stealing from the winter rations. In times of scarcity, theft is tantamount to treason against your own kind." "I didn't take them," Elara said, her voice a raspy whisper, her throat raw from a lingering winter cough. "I was in the laundry all night. Beta Beatrice has the key to the cellar." "I don't." A sharp backhand from one of the guards sent Elara sprawling into the snow. She tasted copper as her lip split. From the porch of the Alpha's estate, Beatrice looked down with a smug, perfectly manicured smile. It was Beatrice who had been siphoning the pack's dried meats and selling them to rogue traders on the black market. Elara had seen her doing it 3 nights ago. To silence the Omega, Beatrice had simply planted a satchel of stolen grain beneath Elara's thin mattress and raised the alarm. In the harsh reality of pack politics, an Alpha would always take the word of his Beta over an orphaned Omega. "Enough lies," Holden snarled, stepping down into the snow. He grabbed Elara by the collar of her dress, hauling her to her feet with bone-rattling force. "By the ancient laws of the Ironwood, I strip you of your pack scent. I strip you of our protection. You are banished. If you are found within our borders by nightfall, you will be hunted and killed." He shoved her backward. Elara stumbled, her bare feet sinking into the freezing slush. "Take her boots, take her coat," Holden ordered. "She leaves with nothing but the clothes on her back." The guards forcefully stripped away her tattered wool coat and the oversized, patched-up boots she had scavenged years ago. The cold hit her instantly, a physical blow that knocked the breath from her lungs. It was -10 degrees outside, and a blizzard was rolling in over the jagged peaks of the Appalachian Range. Leaving the compound was a death sentence, and everyone knew it. As Elara walked toward the heavy iron gates, not a single member of the pack looked her in the eye. They turned their backs, retreating into their warm, fire-lit cabins. The heavy gates slammed shut behind her, the metallic clang sounding like a judge's gavel, sealing her fate. For the first mile, adrenaline pushed her forward. She walked with her arms wrapped tightly around her torso, her breath pluming in thick white clouds. She needed to reach the highway, perhaps flag down a human trucker. But the Ironwood territory was remote, deeply embedded in the mountainous wilderness of West Virginia. The nearest human town was 20 miles away. By the second mile, the physical reality of her situation set in. Hypothermia does not announce itself with sudden drama. It creeps in like a quiet predator. First, her bare feet went numb. The sharp, agonizing pain of the ice, slicing her soles, faded into a dull, heavy block of wood. Her legs followed, her knees locking with every mechanical step. "Keep walking," she told herself, her internal voice sluggish. "If you stop, you die." The snow began to fall harder, thick white flakes blinding her vision. The wind howled through the skeletal trees, a mournful sound that seemed to mock her isolation. Her body began to shiver violently, a desperate, uncontrollable convulsion as her core temperature plummeted. By the 4th mile, her mind began to play tricks on her. The shivering stopped, a dangerous medical sign that her body had given up trying to generate heat. A strange, twisted warmth began to spread through her chest. It was the final, fatal lie of hypothermia. She stumbled over a hidden tree root and crashed hard into a snowbank. She tried to push herself up, but her arms simply wouldn't respond. They lay limp by her sides. Ilara stared at the canopy of pine trees above, the snowflakes dancing in the fading grey light of the afternoon. She was so tired. The snow felt surprisingly soft, like a mattress of down feathers. "Just close your eyes for a minute," a voice whispered in her mind. Ilara let out a final, shuddering breath. The edges of her vision darkened, shrinking until there was nothing left but a pinpoint of grey light. She didn't feel the cold anymore. She didn't feel the hunger. She just felt peace. King Silas Montgomery was not a man prone to mercy. Known across the continent as the Sovereign of the North, Silas ruled the United Pax with an iron fist. He was 28, possessing a towering, heavily muscled physique, striking golden eyes, and a reputation built on the graves of those who had tried to usurp him. He demanded loyalty, order, and absolute obedience. Currently, Silas was furious. He and his 2 most trusted lieutenants, Sullivan and Wyatt, were tracking a group of rogue wolves who had been raiding the neutral zone. The political climate was volatile. Several southern packs, including the Ironwood, had been missing their tribute payments, claiming harsh winters and food shortages. Silas suspected treason, and he had come to the borderlands to see the truth for himself. "Tracks end here, sire," Sullivan muttered, wiping snow from his thick beard. He pointed to the disturbed snow near a frozen creek. "The blizzard is burying their trail. We should head back to the transport." Silas stood still, his senses expanding past the howling wind. His wolf was restless, pacing furiously within his mind. Something was wrong. The air tasted metallic and sharp. "Quiet," Silas ordered, his deep baritone cutting through the storm. He closed his eyes, filtering out the scent of pine, wet earth, and incoming snow. Beneath it all, faint but unmistakable, was the scent of blood. And something else. Vanilla, crushed cedar, and absolute despair. It was a scent that hit Silas with the force of a freight train, knocking the breath from his lungs and sending a shockwave of raw, primal energy straight to his core. "Mate." His wolf slammed against his consciousness, howling a single desperate demand. "Find her!" Without a word to his men, Silas broke into a dead sprint. He didn't shift. There was no time to shed his clothes. He tore through the dense brush, the heavy snow, no obstacle for his enhanced strength. Sullivan and Wyatt shouted behind him, scrambling to keep up with their king's sudden, frantic pace. Silas followed the scent until he nearly tripped over the small mound of snow. He dropped to his knees, his massive hands frantically brushing away the powder. When he saw her, his heart physically stuttered in his chest. She was tiny, completely devoid of any winter gear, clad only in a pathetic, frozen cotton dress. Her skin was an unnatural, terrifying shade of blue-white, her lips cracked and bleeding. Her bare feet were mangled, dark with severe frostbite. She was so still that for one agonizing second, Silas thought he was too late. He ripped off his heavy, fur-lined trench coat and wrapped it tightly around her frail body. As he pulled her against his chest, trying to transfer his own unnatural body heat to her, he felt the faintest, thready beat of her heart against his. "Gods!" Wyatt gasped, finally catching up and coming to a halt behind Silas. Is she a stray? Look at her, Silas. She's an Omega. She's practically a corpse. We should put her out of her misery before the cold finishes the job." Silas turned his head, his golden eyes flashing with a violent, possessive rage that made Wyatt physically recoil. A low, thunderous growl vibrated from deep within Silas's chest, a sound so purely lethal that both of his lieutenants immediately dropped to their knees, baring their necks in submission. "You will call for the medical transport," Silas snarled, his voice vibrating with absolute authority. "You will tell Dr. Harrison to prepare the trauma bay. If she dies, I will hold you both personally responsible." Sullivan immediately grabbed his satellite radio, barking orders into the static. Silas looked back down at the broken girl in his arms. He noted the bruised cheekbone, the split lip, and the sheer emaciation of her frame. This wasn't just a stray who got lost. This was a pack member who had been deliberately starved, beaten, and thrown away to die. Based on their location, she came from the Ironwood pack. Holden, Silas thought, his jaw clenching so hard his teeth ached. "You are a dead man." Within 10 minutes, the armored medical transport roared through the tree line. Paramedics rushed out, but Silas refused to let them touch her. He carried her into the back of the vehicle himself, laying her gently on the gurney. Severe hypothermia, third-degree frostbite on the extremities, and advanced malnutrition, Dr. Harrison said grimly as he immediately hooked up heated IV lines and wrapped her in thermal blankets. He looked up at the king, noting the frantic, protective way Silas hovered over the gurney. Harrison was an older man, one of the few who dared speak frankly to the sovereign. "Sire, I will do everything I can, but her core temperature is in the low 80s. She shouldn't even be breathing right now." "Keep her breathing, Harrison," Silas commanded, grasping Ilara's tiny ice-cold hand in his massive one. "That is an order." When they arrived at the king's heavily fortified mountain estate, the entire court was thrown into chaos. It was unheard of. The Alpha King, a man who had executed traitors without blinking, carrying a filthy, half-dead Omega through the grand marble halls of his palace. For 3 days, Ilara hovered on the precipice of death. Silas did not leave the medical wing. He moved his desk into her room, running his empire from an armchair beside her bed. He watched as the color slowly returned to her cheeks, watched as her broken body fought a brutal war for survival. He also saw the scars. Her back and shoulders were littered with old, faded silver lines, evidence of years of abuse. On the 4th evening, the monitors in the room beeped steadily. Silas was reading a treaty report when he heard a soft, dry gasp. He dropped the papers instantly and moved to the bed. Ilara's eyes fluttered open. They were a striking, clear hazel, but currently wide with absolute, unadulterated terror. She looked at the expensive medical equipment, the plush blankets, and finally at the towering, terrifying man standing over her. She immediately tried to scramble backward, letting out a hoarse cry of pain as her raw feet scraped against the sheets. "Please," she whimpered, raising her arms defensively over her head, expecting a blow. "Please, I didn't steal anything, I swear. Don't hit me." The words felt like a dagger twisting in Silas's gut. The realization of what she had endured, of what she expected from him, broke something fundamental inside the king. Slowly, deliberately, Silas Montgomery, the butcher of the North, the absolute ruler of the werewolf packs, took a step back and lowered himself to one knee beside her bed, placing himself below her eye level to show he was not a threat. "I am not going to hurt you," Silas said, his voice dropping to a gentle, rumbly whisper she had never heard from an alpha before. "My name is Silas. You are safe here, little one. I swear on my life, no one will ever lay a hand on you again." Ilara stared at him, trembling, unable to comprehend the impossible reality unfolding before her. The king was kneeling for an Omega. The physical healing took weeks, but the psychological scars ran much deeper. Ilara spent her first 10 days in King Silas's mountain fortress, locked in a state of hypervigilance. She hoarded the bread rolls from her dinner trays, hiding them beneath her mattress in the opulent guest suite. terrified that the sudden abundance of food was a trick. She flinched when the maids entered to change the fires, and she refused to look Silas in the eye, fully expecting the towering king to demand payment for his hospitality through grueling labor or worse. But Silas Montgomery defied every brutal stereotype Ilara had ever learned about Alphas. He did not demand. He did not yell. He simply existed as a pillar of quiet, immovable safety in her chaotic world. Every evening, after dealing with the grueling politics of the United Packs, Silas would come to her chambers. He never crossed the threshold of her bedroom unless invited. Instead, he would sit in the adjoining sitting area, reading dossiers or drinking black coffee, simply allowing his calming cedar and vanilla scent to fill the space. "You don't have to hide the bread, Ilara," Silas said gently one evening, not looking up from a heavy leather-bound ledger. He had caught her slipping a croissant into her pocket. "The kitchens run 24 hours a day. If you want a meal at 3 in the morning, you only have to press the intercom. No one will ever deny you food in my territory. Ever." Ilara stood frozen by the dining cart, her cheeks flushing with a deep, humiliating red. "Old habits, sire," she whispered, her voice still raspy from the lingering damage of the cold. "Silas," he corrected softly, finally meeting her gaze with those intense, golden eyes. "Just Silas." As December bled into January, the ice between them began to thaw. Under the meticulous care of Dr. Harrison, Ilara's frostbite healed, leaving only faint, silvery scars on her toes and heels. The hollows of her cheeks filled out, and her dull, brittle hair regained a rich, dark, chestnut sheen. For the first time in her life, she looked her age. With her health returning, her memory sharpened, bringing forth details of her childhood that the trauma of the Ironwood Pack had buried deep. One night, while sitting by the roaring fireplace with Silas, she spoke of her parents. "I remember my father had a study," Ilara murmured, tracing the rim of a porcelain teacup. "It smelled like old paper and pipe tobacco. He used to show me these heavy, wax-sealed documents. He told me that the land the Ironwood compound sits on, all the way down to the river in the Monongahela National Forest, belonged to our family, the Sterlings." Silas, who had been relaxed in his armchair, suddenly went perfectly still. His brow furrowed. "Your family name is Sterling. Your father was Jonathan Sterling." Ilara nodded, shrinking back slightly at his sudden intensity. "Yes. He died in a border skirmish when I was 7. That's when Holden took over as Alpha. He said my father's debts meant I had to work to pay them off. He said we were penniless." A dark, terrifying shadow crossed Silas's face. He stood up abruptly, pacing the length of the Persian rug. The pieces were clicking together, forming a picture of betrayal so deep it warranted an execution. "Wyatt!" Silas roared, the command echoing through the heavy oak doors. Within seconds, his beta rushed into the room, bowing deeply. "Sire?" "Contact Nathaniel Reed in the Intelligence Division immediately," Silas ordered, his voice cold as a winter grave. "I want a full financial and territorial audit of the Ironwood Pack dating back 12 years. Pull the property records from the Kanawha County Clerk's office. Look for a deed of trust under the name Jonathan Sterling, and cross-reference Holden's private bank accounts with Fidelity Investments and offshore holdings." Wyatt looked bewildered but nodded sharply. "Right away, sire. Suspected embezzlement?" "Suspected treason," Silas corrected, his golden eyes flashing with a predatory light. He looked back at Ilara, his expression softening instantly as he saw her trembling hands. He crossed the room, kneeling before her chair just as he had done in the medical wing. He took her small, warm hands in his massive ones. "Ilara," Silas said, his voice vibrating with absolute certainty. "Jonathan Sterling was not a lowly Omega who died in a skirmish. He was the legitimate Alpha of the Ironwood territory. He was one of my father's most trusted allies." Ilara's breath hitched. But Holden. Holden was his beta, Silas finished, the pieces of the puzzle locking into a grim, horrifying picture. He didn't just steal your winter rations, Ilara. He murdered your parents, stole your birthright, and enslaved the true heir to keep his secret buried. He drained your family's wealth to line his own pockets and pay off the guards to keep quiet. The room spun. 12 years of beatings, 12 years of scrubbing floors on her hands and knees, eating scraps thrown to the dogs, believing she was a worthless burden. It was all a lie, a meticulously crafted, blood-soaked lie. A tear finally spilled over Ilara's lashes, tracking down her cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sorrow, it was a tear of pure, unadulterated rage. Silas reached up, his thumb gently brushing the tear away. His wolf was howling, demanding the blood of the men who had tortured his mate. "Do you want justice, Ilara?" Silas asked, his voice a dark, lethal promise. Ilara looked into the eyes of the sovereign of the north. The frightened, starving Omega had died in the snowstorm a month ago. The woman sitting in the chair was a sterling. "I want everything he took from me," Ilara whispered, "and I want him to feel exactly what I felt when the gates closed." Alpha Holden arrived at the Sovereign's mountain estate in mid-February, flanked by Beta Beatrice and 4 of his heaviest guards. They were dressed in opulent, custom-tailored suits and thick designer furs, reeking of arrogance and cheap perfume. Holden had received a royal summons to the king's court. In his hubris, he believed Silas was finally going to grant him a seat on the High Council. He had brought a briefcase full of forged financial documents, prepared to offer the king a lucrative tribute from their latest black market meat trades. The grand throne room was a cavernous hall of polished black marble and towering stained glass. Silas sat upon the raised dais, his posture relaxed, but his eyes completely devoid of warmth. Wyatt and Sullivan stood flanking the throne, their hands resting casually on the hilts of their ceremonial blades. "King Silas," Holden boomed, stepping forward and offering a shallow, disrespectful bow. Beatrice curtsied beside him, flashing a coquettish smile that Silas ignored completely. "The Ironwood Pack answers your call. We bring tribute and good tidings from the south." "Do you, Holden?" Silas's voice echoed off the high ceilings, chilling the room. "I was under the impression the Ironwood territory was suffering. You claimed a food shortage. You claimed the winter was too harsh to pay your standard taxes." Holden smoothed his silk tie, feigning a look of deep sorrow. "It has been a brutal season, sire. We had to banish several thieves just to keep our loyal members from starving. But we managed to scrape together this offering for the crown." "Thieves?" Silas repeated, the word dripping with venom. "Tell me about these thieves, Holden. How do you punish a thief in the dead of winter?" Beatrice stepped forward, eager to impress the king. "We strip them, sire. We throw them into the blizzard. It is the old law, a harsh necessity to maintain order." "The old law," Silas mused, leaning forward, resting his chin on his steepled fingers. "And what does the old law say about a beta who assassinates his alpha, steals his land deeds, and enslaves his only daughter?" Holden's smug expression vanished. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly, ashen grey. I don't know what you mean, sire. Alpha Sterling died in a rogue attack." "Did he?" Silas snapped his fingers. Nathaniel Reed, the intelligence officer, stepped from the shadows holding a thick manila folder. He tossed it onto the marble floor at Holden's feet. Photographs spilled out, bank statements from offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, copies of the original land deeds filed in Kanawha County, and forensic reports detailing the exact type of poison found in Jonathan Sterling's exhumed remains, a poison traced directly back to a black market dealer Beatrice frequented. "You drained the Sterling Trust, Holden," Silas said, his voice dropping to a lethal, terrifying register. You funneled $3 million through shell companies, while the true heir to the territory scrubbed your floors for mouldy bread. Holden took a step back, panic finally setting in. "Sire, this is a fabrication, a conspiracy by my enemies. Who accuses me of this?" "I do." The heavy oak doors at the side of the dais opened. The entire room fell dead silent. Ilara stepped into the light. She was unrecognizable from the broken, freezing girl they had thrown away. She wore a tailored, deep crimson dress that highlighted the flush of health in her cheeks. Around her neck rested a heavy silver pendant bearing the crest of the Sterling family. But it wasn't just her appearance that shocked them. It was her aura. Standing beside the Alpha King, her presence commanded the room. Beatrice gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. "Ilara, impossible! You're dead! The blizzard!" "The blizzard brought me to the king," Ilara said, her voice steady, ringing clear and strong across the marble hall. She looked down at her former tormentors, feeling no fear, only a cold, absolute disgust. "You planted the stolen meat under my bed, Beatrice. You forged my father's signature, Holden. You stole my life." "She's a lying Omega!" Holden roared, his panic turning to violent rage. His claws extended, and he lunged toward the dais, forgetting entirely where he was. He didn't make it 3 steps. Silas moved faster than the human eye could track. In a blur of motion, the king was off his throne and standing between Ilara and Holden. Silas didn't use a weapon. He simply backhanded Holden with such devastating, bone-crushing force that the false alpha was thrown halfway across the room, crashing into a marble pillar. Holden crumpled to the floor, coughing up blood, his jaw visibly dislocated. Beatrice screamed, dropping to her knees and cowering as Wyatt and Sullivan immediately drew their blades, pressing the cold steel to the throats of Holden's paralyzed guards. Silas stood over Holden, his golden eyes glowing with pure, unadulterated dominance. The pressure of the king's aura was so heavy it cracked the marble tiles beneath his boots. "By the ancient laws of the United Pax," Silas's voice boomed like thunder, "I find you guilty of high treason, assassination, and the torture of my destined mate." Holden's eyes widened in sheer, absolute terror as the words registered. Mate. He had starved and tortured the king's mate. "I strip you of your stolen rank," Silas decreed. "I seize all your assets, properties, and accounts. They will be returned to the Sterling estate, under the control of Alpha Ilara Sterling." Silas turned his gaze to Beatrice, who was sobbing hysterically into her hands. "And as for your punishment," Silas continued, stepping back and gesturing to the massive, heavy oak doors leading out to the mountain peak. Outside, a brutal February blizzard was raging, howling against the stained glass. "You seem to favor the old laws, so we will honor them." Realization hit Holden and Beatrice simultaneously. They began to beg, crawling on the floor, weeping and pleading for mercy. Ilara stood tall beside Silas. She looked at the 2 people who had made her life a living hell. She thought of her frozen feet, of the agonizing pain of her lungs shutting down, of the hopelessness she felt in the dark. She felt Silas's hand gently wrap around hers, his thumb stroking her knuckles in a silent show of absolute support. "Take their coats," Ilara ordered, her voice echoing with the authority of a true alpha. "Take their boots. They leave with nothing but the clothes on their backs." The guards moved swiftly, stripping Holden and Beatrice of their expensive furs and designer shoes. The heavy iron-wrought doors were hauled open, letting in a blast of freezing, blinding snow. Holden and Beatrice were dragged, kicking and screaming, to the threshold. "Ilara, please!" Beatrice shrieked, her silk dress whipping in the gale-force winds. "We won't survive an hour out there." Ilara looked at them one last time, her expression perfectly composed. "Then you had better start walking." The heavy doors slammed shut behind them, the metallic clang echoing through the hall like a judge's gavel. The silence that followed was profound. The debt had been paid. The karma was absolute. Silas turned to Elara, the lethal predator fading back into the gentle giant who had sat by her bedside. He lifted her hand, pressing a soft, reverent kiss to her knuckles. "The Ironwood pack is yours, Queen Elara," Silas murmured, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. "But I'm hoping you'll choose to rule it from here. With me." Elara looked up into the golden eyes of the king who had knelt in the snow to save a dying orphan. She smiled, stepping into his arms. "I think," Elara whispered, resting her head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart, "I am exactly where I belong." Did the Alpha King's brutal justice satisfy your craving for karma? If you loved seeing Elara rise from a broken orphan to a powerful queen, hit that like button and share this story with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss our daily tales of romance, betrayal, and ultimate revenge. What should happen next? Comment below.